If you haven't heard the word resilience already, likely you will be hearing it more and more in the future. Resilience is the term that people are increasingly using to describe how communities are dealing with climate change. It is used to understand how ecosystems respond to climate change related to disturbances like fire or drought. And resilience can also be used to understand how some individuals are able to bounce back and even thrive after experiencing horrifying conditions such as abuse by a family member or violent conflict. Broadly, resilience refers to ability of individuals, environments, and communities to adapt to disruptions and, when needed, to transform themselves for a more promising future. Resilience gets to heart of climate change and of environmental education focused on climate change. Facing rising sea levels, drought, and other disruptions brought about by increasing levels of greenhouse gases, will human society and environmental education simply adapt to our new environments? Will environmental education become a set of lessons in how to survive flooding around our homes and schools? Or how to adapt to declining food security caused by prolonged droughts? Or might environmental education become a force in the needed sustainability transformations to ward off the worst of the impacts of rising temperatures and rising sea levels? Ecosystems and communities that are able to adapt and transform when facing change have a number of characteristics in common. For example, they have high levels of biological diversity. An ecosystem with a diverse set of organisms is able to adapt to changing conditions because it has more species able to fill the gap left by species that suffer population declines. For example, if one tree species that provides seeds eaten by wildlife dies out, a system that is biologically diverse may have another tree that deer, bear, and bird can feed on. Similarly, cultural diversity can be important in community adaptation and transformation when people with different backgrounds bring a diverse set of approaches to address climate change, whether they be particular ways of civic participation or growing food. Food is one of multiple ecosystem services that nature provides to humans and other animals. Other ecosystem services include flood protection that is provided by sand dunes. Ecosystem services are also critical to resilience. Importantly, environmental education programs can directly enhance biodiversity and ecosystem services. For example, program participants might help restore oyster populations by installing artificial oyster reefs and populating them with young oysters. Or they might help spread discarded Christmas trees along the beach to start the process of rebuilding sand dunes. In these ways, environmental education programs foster social and ecological resilience. In addition to biodiversity and ecosystem services, resilient social ecological systems also have strong social capital. Environmental education programs where students learn to trust each other and build connections with their peers and adults build social capital. When a community is devastated by fire, people who are connected and who trust each other are more likely to come to each other's aid. In a heat wave in Chicago, seniors who did not have close family members or friends, that is, social connections, were more likely to die. Here again, environmental education can play a role. We can design programs where participants from multiple generations depend on each other, like in a civic ecology restoration project or an outdoor adventure challenge, and thus build connections and trust. Such social capital may help the community to adapt after a disaster. A community may even transform by building greater social capital when working together to rebuild after disaster. Here again, environmental education can play a role by bringing people together to restored dunes and create community gardens, thus enhancing ecosystem services and build social capital. The 2018 IPCC report points out in stark terms the need to transform society if we are to limit the disruptions and devastations brought about by rising sea levels of greenhouse gases. Thus, perhaps the most important question facing environmental education is how we can contribute to this transformation. While important, individual behaviors will not be sufficient. We need to also consider collective action. This might entail working with our social networks to change norms among a larger group of people. Those norms can be related to lifestyle behaviors such as replacing meat and dairy consumption with plant-rich diets. They can also be related to policy, like leading one's social network, in writing letters to government representatives, or in collaborating with local cafes or with a school cafeteria to reduce single-use plastics. Finally, this work will not be done by environmental education organizations acting alone. The work of adapting to climate change in environmentally friendly ways and of transforming communities to become more sustainable will be done by collaborations among nonprofit, government, educational, and business organizations. In short, resilience to climate change requires an environmental education that fosters ties among program participants, that builds connections between program participants and other community members, and that is active in partnerships among the suite of local organizations that share responsibility for our air, land, water, wildlife, and fellow humans.